Hello, and welcome to the Jared Hurst podcast. This podcast is about understanding ourselves, others, and the tools you can use in order to transform your life. This week, we're going to be talking about the grief you don't recognize. So, the grief you don't recognize, well, it's the grief that's underneath the surface. You remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about emotional layers and how when we have emotions, there's different layers to them, especially these really intense emotions like grief, sadness, anger, etc. A lot of the times with that, we have multiple emotions that we need to work through, and there's new layers to this. Now, this topic is somewhat similar to that. I'm not trying to be repetitive, but as I'm growing as a person, as I'm experiencing things, I make realizations, and I want to share those realizations with you so that way they can help you in your life and you can make those same realizations at an earlier point in your life. Now, I have a friend, his name's Henry Amar. I love Henry to death. And he says this, I don't know if he stole this from somebody. So if you've heard this from somebody else, I apologize. But he says, new level, new devil, or new level, new emotions, or whatever it might be. As we are going through these emotions, there's new layers to life. I was talking with somebody about this recently, and it's so easy to feel like as we're growing, as we're developing as people, that all of a sudden it feels like we've had this big setback. We work on something, we challenge ourselves, we grow, and all of a sudden we're in this really great emotional and mental space. And then all of a sudden we have this new difficult thing that we're dealing with, something that's new and challenging. And I believe, and I think a lot of people would back me up on this, that what happens in life is when we reach a new level in our life, all of a sudden we're there and we're ready to tackle that new layer of emotion, that new layer of whatever it is that we're dealing with. And so that's what brought me to emotional layers. Well, as I worked through some of those emotional layers and I got to the space I am now, I have been in probably the best emotional headspace and mental headspace that I've ever been in. That doesn't mean that I wasn't in a good space when I started the podcast. I didn't start the podcast till I really felt like I was ready to go out and help other people. I knew that I still had growth, that I still had different layers and levels that I was going to do. I don't think there really is an end to that process. You'll always be moving up to a new challenge, to a new level, to a new awareness and a different emotion, whatever that might be in your life. And when you reach that layer, that new level, all of a sudden a new challenge comes with it. Well, with grief, sometimes that new layer, and this is a realization that I had recently, is because there is something we are grieving that we are not aware of. And this can be especially true when we're talking about relationships and death. So if you think about it, I want you to think into your life. Think about a time where you had somebody that you wanted to surprise them with something, or you planned to have an experience with somebody. And in your mind, you had an idea of how things were going to work out. Then you finally do this thing with this person. You finally surprise them or whatever it ended up being, and they didn't react the way that you anticipated. You feel like a big letdown. You might be really disappointed. You might be really angry. There's a lot of different things. You surprise somebody, you made this effort to do something for somebody that is out of the norm, that is not something that you would typically do, and then there's this massive letdown and this feeling that comes from not having the result that you anticipated. You can relate to that? You think of a moment that's something similar to that in your life? Okay, now keep that in mind. And now think about when you have somebody that passes away, you have a marriage that ends, you have a relationship that ends. With that person, you have an idea in your mind of what you think life is going to be like. You have an anticipation of all of these future moments, these experiences that you're going to have together. Now, if you have this massive feeling at times when you surprise somebody or have an experience with somebody and it doesn't work out how you want, and that letdown, that loss of how things don't work out the way you planned, makes you angry, makes you sad, makes you grieve, how much more so is that going to be with somebody that you lose all of that future? You're not just losing one moment. You're not just having one moment that gets impacted and doesn't work out the way you want. It's a loss of everything that you anticipated was going to occur with this individual. And in those moments, there are things that we don't recognize, that we don't realize, that could be causing us internal grief. So, of course, I'm going to give you an example. I've had relationships, and after those relationships end, I have had a time of grief where I'm trying to deal with the emotions in order to let those people go and to move on with my life. Now, in those moments, I think to myself, oh, all these experiences that I was going to have with this person are no longer going to be there. And maybe on a conscious level, I recognize each experience that I'm missing out of. But I probably don't go that deep with it. I don't go multiple layers and realize all the things that my subconscious mind are thinking about, the things that are going on underneath the surface that I realize that I've missed out on. All I feel is this big, heavy sadness. Well, as I was working through these emotions around some of these past relationships, I was doing some breath work in the last few weeks. And this is why I love breath work, because breath work gives us the ability to tap into our subconscious mind and make realizations that we don't even realize are there. Things that, well, which is obvious, right? If we're talking about things that we are in our subconscious mind, of course we're not aware of them. When those moments happen, all of a sudden we realize something that we're dealing with on an internal level. And I had a realization that I was grieving children from those relationships. I had been so focused on this person and my connection with that person and letting go of my connection with that person that even though I was aware I had a connection to their children, I didn't realize on what a big level I was still grieving that person and that I hadn't consciously allowed myself to really feel in and experience the loss of that connection. There's other things. You may have somebody in your life. Let's say that you're a parent and you lost a child. If you did, I am so sorry that you have to deal with that. I cannot imagine. I remember once I was at my parents' house and we couldn't find my youngest daughter. I was terrified. It is one of the scariest moments of my life, thinking that somehow she had been kidnapped or injured or I don't know what. And obviously, that is not nearly on the level of actually losing a child. So you have this loss of this child, and you miss out on all these opportunities. But do you recognize and realize that part of the grief you're experiencing is not just for that child. It's for the grandchildren that you'll never get to meet. It might be for the spouse, the in-law that you'll never get to meet. It's for the trips that you never get to enjoy. It's for the first experiences, the graduation, the helping them through the hard times, the new job, whatever it might be, there's all these experiences that line up. And if you're thinking to yourself, I've let go of this person, I've accepted, because that's how grief works. If you want to go and you want to work through grief, it's all about accepting what's occurred. That helps lessen the pain and make everything more manageable. I don't think grief ever truly goes away, but it becomes less intense at times, and I think it becomes less frequent. But I digress. The point is, if you are grieving and have allowed yourself to cry and feel all the heartache around that person, and you're still experiencing some deep, intense emotion, it may be because there's one of these unrealized experiences that is really affecting you in here. I think of the people that I love, the children of people that I've been in relationships with, and there are children there that I have a strong sense of loss about not being able to be in their lives, not being able to experience things with them. And that pain is something that I haven't faced. And so I've spent time in that emotion. To me, the thing that's going to really help you is when you feel that emotion, is really feeling into it and really allowing it to come out. I've had some times where I've started to cry and then I've really sunk into that loss and had just an enormous release of pain. It's not pleasant. As human beings, we try to avoid the things that are hurtful, the things that don't make us comfortable. And a lot of the times, those things that don't make us comfortable are the things that we need the most. That's how we grow. That's how we move on. That's how we mourn, is we allow ourselves to feel and experience that uncomfortable emotion. So if you are dealing with some type of loss, and grief can be so many things. It can be a job, it can be a pet, it can be a person, it can be an experience. There isn't one right way in which grief has to occur. But if you are experiencing those intense emotional feelings, and you feel like you have truly allowed yourself to grieve, but are still having that, start to search within yourself and say, is there an unrealized grief? Is there something related to this where I am so focused on this thing that I'm not realizing the thing that is right in front of me? Or maybe even not so obvious. With me, I think it's really obvious looking at it that I would feel grief around the loss of connection with those children. But I hadn't ever given myself a time to truly feel and process that. I'd only given myself time around their mother. And if it's something different, like a job, maybe it's an experience. Maybe it's the opportunities that you thought that income was going to provide you for your family and the experience that you thought you were going to have with your children. And so all of a sudden you're grieving that on a subconscious level that you don't recognize. So dig deep, search your feelings, ponder it, think it out in your mind, and the answers will come to you. I believe in you. I know that you can do it. And until next time, remember that you are not alone.